Ba-dum-bum, ba-dum-bum. Hey, what's up? I had to look it up how long I'd owned the land. Yes, you want to find out where the land is, type in Valley View Ferry, and look on Tates Creek Road, which is the main road that just goes south of this city, Lexington. I got a 3+ acre mini farm that my realtor is listing either tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It's really nice. It's got water on it and electricity, 140-yard gravel driveway, about 300 foot of old slave, well, actually I think it was Irish built fence. It's like about 150-year-old stone fence that's on it. It's a cabin foundation of a hermit that used to live on the land back in the day. There's an old guy named Vic Sabo that used to ride his bike past there when he was younger and see the hermit that lived there. 2 waterfalls, a lot of huge trees, so if anybody's interested in a 3-acre mini farm that's exactly 7 miles south of the outskirts of Lexington, which is this city. Yeah, anyway, shameless plug. Yeah, I'd owned the land for 19 years. Fascinating. Yeah. Before getting into the crux of this video, and by the way, Cosmic Unity is downloadable. It's only 4 pages in the link below. I noticed a bunch of rising anti-intellectualism. I have a video tomorrow on quantum. For some reason, like the quantum nonsense kept popping up in my feed, and I got all these replies back. I said, well, this is just quantum nonsense, something like that. And I got all these replies back from these Gen Z pseudo-intellectuals, these intellectual troglodytes that have no idea what that word means, and yet they would leave me all these comments saying, you don't know what that word quantum means? Well, not only do I know what the word quantum means, where it came from, how it's used, why it's used, the denotation of the term, but also how it's used. See, there's denotative use and there's connotative use. So I actually do know a lot about quantum. I also do know the fact that the gods of field theory, vis-a-vis Tesla, Faraday, Heaviside, James Clerk Maxwell, Charles Proteus Steinmetz, J.J. Thomson, they didn't make use of the word because there's nothing you could point to in nature. Look at that, there's quantum. So I actually do know what the word quantum means. So let's dissect that. Also, too, I noticed there's a huge rise in anti-intellectualism. A bunch of people think I'm using big words. Maybe, let's stop for a second here and think, sorry a second. Instead of accusing somebody of maybe using big words, maybe your vocabulary is just a little bit too small. You know, anti-intellectualism technically is no different than praising stupidity. I don't care how smart or dumb anybody is. I've always given praise to wisdom, enosis over that of episteme, or empirical knowledge, but big words are only big if your vocabulary is very small. You know, to an ant, a little person is a supergiant. So it's all about perspective. So it's not a big vocabulary. It might be that, not meaning you, but somebody else. So, by the way, something is only a word salad if you're using the word wrong, which is really good for comics and stuff, but I will not bend in any way, shape, or form at anti-intellectualism. By the way, like most doctor/medical jargon, if you open up a medical book, and I don't have a whole lot of respect for doctors. I know a few good doctors. These are not big words. They're just words that is very specific to a narrow field of like medical science. So it's just words that your average everyday Joe does not use. So there are words that are specific to certain categories of science. That of field theory is no different than, like, say, medical science, for example. We can call it, and people have accused me, people used to accuse me of inventing the word dielectricity until I pointed out the countless books where they were used over 100 years ago by geniuses such as James Clerk Maxwell, J.J. Thomson, Nikola Tesla, Oliver Heaven. I don't know. I didn't invest. I remember there were like 3, hey, would you invent this word dielectricity? They're doing the same thing about the word counter space. Now, I've said before, you could call it many different things, like anti-de Sitter space, zero point, ether, non-Cartesian, centripetal. Since space is technically empty, it's not a thing. As Nikola Tesla said, it has no properties, which is true, then let's just use the logic of a child that even a child has. Well, if space is empty, and, space is, mass and magnitude. Because one thing I agree with every scientist on, so-called scientist, is an atom is 99.99999% empty space, just like a big hollow ball. There's not much there. That's true. Well, since space is empty, then that must mean necessitatively that counter space is full, or the real definition of inertia or energy. So I don't care what term, neither does Mother Nature. If people say, you invented the word counter space! Well, next time somebody says that, I didn't write these books, of course. These are 4 books on Amazon. They're all about counter space. Space and Counter Space by Louis Lockhart Ernst. Olive Wincher's book on projective geometry, which is about counter space. Space and Counter Space by Nick C. Thompson. Another book called Science Between Space and Counter Space. Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't come up with this word, and I didn't come up with the word dielectricity. And just like specific medical terminology, which is you won't find your average Joe Blow using, about like really, the transverse lentibular muscle of whatever, some sort of obtuse medical term that even I don't know. It's like, it's not a big word, it's just a non-normal everyday word. But if you're going to talk about field theory, it has its own jargon or lexicon. So I'm never trying to dazzle anybody with words. If I've dazzled you with big words, then it means it's a category of words that you're not familiar with. Or you just say, I don't know. This is a word that I've not heard of. I might have heard of it once or twice, but I've got to look it up. But I am not one that is going to bend to anti-intellectualism. I just had to point that out. These are big words. Yeah, and to an ant, a little person is a giant monster and a giant. So it's all about perspective, girlfriend. Here it is. It's only 4 pages long. The first page doesn't actually count. And I could take all 3 of these pages. There's page 2. This is where the text starts. Page 3 and page 4. I can just take all of these and put them in like a 10-point font and only take up a third of a page. And it's the actual cosmic unity. It's very, very simple. And the first page is not about cosmic unity. It's a legend or a key. And, so, for key for understanding, most people don't know what a hyperboloid is. It's like an hourglass shape, no different than this little hourglass here. It's encased in Lexan. It's a hyperboloid. A hyperboloid, yep. This, of course, is moving towards or increasing energy, contracting, anti-Cartesian, acceleration, anti-spatial. I'm going to fast forward through this. And by the way, the link for this you could download in the description below. Secondly, of course, is a torus, which is spatial Cartesian. It's a geometry of magnetism itself, i.e. centrifugal force in motion. These are not big words, by the way. I even grew up as a child hearing the words centripetal and centrifugal. I don't know why people think these are big words. Maybe people don't use like large words anymore. Maybe things are becoming kind of like the movie Idiocracy, where, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy, where it's basically de-evolution. Yeah. And I talk about the term loop, and loop is, of course, a reference to a 3-dimensional force vector, and I have an example of it right here below. And it's the extrapolation. I can't enlarge that, and I don't have my mouse pad here where I could actually zoom in. But you can see it's little arrows denotated extrapolating out the geometry of a torus or a donut. A donut, this, of course, is the 3-dimensional S-curve, which follows the reciprocating geometry of a torus. From the inside to the outside, and from the outside to the inside, then, of course, repeating. And I give you some images, like a cross-section of the conjugate field. Because a negative image of hourglass is a torus. A negative image of a torus is an hourglass. It's a conjugate geometry of the entire universe. You can see that in this image below. And, of course, a hyperboloid up here and a torus over there. So that's just a legend, kind of like on a map. If you remember, most people don't use maps anymore, like paper maps. In the bottom, there's a little key or legend. Yeah? You remember that? Are you old enough to remember using a map instead of, like, Google Maps? Then I actually have there's 3 sets of 3. I didn't actually make it that way. It just turned out that way. All of this spontaneously popped into my head at the same time. It didn't unfold like you unfold a book, page 1, page 2. It's just like, boom, all at once. And It just happened to be 3 sets of 3. I could have left one of these out, but I wanted to have the fullness of the description. There's 3 energy capacitances, of course, or barriers of the universe. There's undersea barrier, which of course is EMR, and this of course is an open loop or a torus or a propagating torus. Light, of course, once again, is not an emission, neither is sound an emission. It's an ether perturbation modality, and of course sound is a perturbation of the air. Air is not an emission. It is not traveling. It's the rate of induction or the hysteresis of the medium. In the case of sound, we call it the speed of sound. In the case of light, that's called C. That's the propagation barrier of EMR. And if it's undersea, then it's EMR, and that is, of course, an open loop. I mean, you can actually, if you can think about it for 5 seconds, you'll be able to visualize it easily. Everybody's seen this EMR line diagram of light, transversal electrical magnetic, and then longitudinal rarefaction and compression. And of course along this would be like pearls on a necklace, which is what these foolish scientists call photons. So it is open loop rather than being closed loop. A closed loop would be, of course, a torus, and that of course is also 2 matter, but I'll get that in a second. The third energy barrier is oversea, which of course is closed loop. Once again, a torus, non-propagating. This is a reference to matter. The third one is over mass. This is a collapsed closed loop. Matter, of course, being a closed loop, a collapsed closed loop of a supermass. So then, of course, this is really simple. This is not difficult. You know, you don't read it like you're reading your science fiction book. You just read it slowly and you think about it for a few seconds. A few more words, you think about it. There's 3 energy geometries in the universe, and this is, once again, very simple. Might not be simplex, but it is very simple. Compound force and inertia, i.e. a torus and a hyperboloid, because light itself, EMR, is a compound circuit modality. You actually have the pearls on the necklace, if you will, analogous to the so-called photons of light. And of course, there's no such thing as a photon. That's a conceptual abstraction of a compression. You can't say like slapping somebody, which kind of felt like a brick hitting your face, for example. Like, well, there's a slap particle. It's like, no, it was an energy transference, you know, and it occurred all at once. You know, it might have felt like a rock hitting your face, but it wasn't a mass. And that's where science really fails. They'll say, well, you have as much energy if a rock hits your face at X miles per hour than it is if, like, Mike Tyson, you know, takes his fist and, you know, does that number. We have the same energy. We're going to call that the slap or punch particle. This would be an actual particle, except, of course, it's composed of mass. And this is, of course, where they fail. If you're a hammer, everything's a nail. If you're an unintelligent materialist, everything, of course, is a particle. So you have the compound force and inertia, or torus and hyperboloid combined. The compound geometry of light. Of course, if it's a undersea barrier, then it's EMR, or light. And, of course, matter, which is an oversea barrier. Secondly, we have the force geometry of centrifugal, which of course is what the torus is, centrifugal, the creation of space. When you have space, the creation of space, which space has no properties, once again, you have mass and magnitude. But oversea, we have the geometry of magnetism. Magnetism, of course, is a dielectric field. Third energy geometry is increasing energy or rest, i.e. inertia, geometry, i.e. the hyperboloid. So-called gravity, or what is incorrectly big time called magnetic attraction, is this increasing inertia or increasing centripetal inertia and acceleration towards rest. Rest, of course, by definition, would be right here at the middle. Because you can't tell time if you can't see the top or the bottom here, right? If you're looking right at the middle here where there's rest and there's no motion. Technically, you can't say that of this because the sand is literally passing through the middle. But in the case of energy, that would be the plane of inertia, the center of which, of course, would be rest. See, this is spatial. See, I find it so funny that people absolutely don't get something so simple they could teach it to a child. It's like, here, little Johnny, you see these things? These are like little balloons on either end, right? Yeah. Yeah, you have the movement of sand. This is how we tell time. Yeah, I get that part. I do know how an hourglass works. Okay, right here in the middle, you can't tell time, can you, Johnny? No, you can't, because time is a measure of mass and magnitude. Here we have mass and magnitude on either end. Isn't that right, Johnny? Yeah. What about right here in the center, where you can't tell time? Yeah, I can't tell time. No time, no space. So here would be spatial, and here would be counterspatial, or we could say anti-Cartesian. See, this is not a difficult premise to understand. When I hear anti-intellectualism is a fancy way of saying pro-stupidity. It's just spatial, Johnny? Johnny gets that. Yeah, here we got the globes of spatiality. We have mass and magnitude. Up here we have lobes, which are spatial. And then we have mass and magnitude, and therefore we have time. Because here and here we can tell time. Here we can't tell time, and there's no space here. There technically is a little space on this, but in the case of energy, there's no space there. Even little Johnny can get this. Then Johnny said, well, what can you tell me then about space and counter space? And, well, here we have space, and here we got mass and magnitude, and here we can tell time. Yeah. And here we have no space, no time, and that would be what, Johnny? Counter space! Well, it wasn't too far of a travel, was it? There's counter space, boys and girls. Man! That is anti-intellectualism. People say, hey, I get counter space! It's a crazy word he came up with! Oh, you mean like the 4 books that I just got done showing you about counter space? Yeah. See, it doesn't piss me off. I find it... Anybody that's praising stupidity has shamed themselves. You know, it's just like throwing poo against a fan. You know, it's going to come right back and hit you in the face. You can't praise anti-intellectualism. It don't work. Even little Johnny understands an hourglass. If little Johnny can understand an hourglass, surely a grown-arse man could understand it, right? Right? Sure. Lastly, here we have, this is the second set of 3, increasing inertia rest, i.e. magnetic lower, because we already went over that one. Here we go. And then the last set of 3, which itself has 3 subdivisions. And that's kind of interesting, 3 sets of 3. But I didn't make it that way, it just turned out to be that way. These are the 3 energy and force classes, or the 3 classes. And man, this unifies light, magnetism, gravity, mass. It unifies all of those in this last set of 3. You have an open loop, or pre-boundary, i.e. Less than C, i.e. EMR. So sub-C capacitance, we could say. This is what we call light, or EMR. And then we have a second, which is an attribute. Interesting, every one of these has an attributional modality. Now, the attributional modality of light would be point source, open loop light. And that's what we call the laser. It's propagating energy. Yeah? Propagation doesn't mean movement. It means propagation. Yeah, by the way. Distinction with a difference. This, of course, is polarized light. Kind of like a magnet's a polarized object, yeah? So here's the attributional modality of light. We call it a laser. Second, we have magnetic geometries. These are non-propagating, yeah? Closed loop, or a complete torus. Closed loop light, which is what matter is, just super high energy light, which is, of course, over C capacitance, yeah? Or over barrier, the barrier being C. The so-called sound barrier, you've heard of that one? Everybody's heard of the sound barrier. Then we have an actual C barrier. That's the rate of induction barrier. Over C barrier is where you end up with a closed loop or circular frequency. We end up with barrier light that we call matter, non-propagating energy. Yep. And lastly, underneath that set of matter geometry, we have an attribute modality, just like we had up here with lasers relative to light. Here we have an attributional modality of matter, which is point source, closed loop light, a magnet. So we have a polarized matter here, and up here we have polarized light. Isn't it amazing how divinely simple this is? We have light here, which is under C. Here we have matter, which is over C, or over barrier. And each one of these has a modality, the first one being a laser and the second one being a magnet. Here we have polarized light, and here we have polarized matter. Isn't it neat? How divinely simple that is. By the way, all of this, of course, is copyright by me. Use it as you wish. It's completely free. Once again, the description for this is below. Lastly, we have mass, conglomerate matter, geometries, and here we have another modality, the last modality. And this is non-point source, closed loop, conventionally called, of course, gravity. This is, of course, a conglomeration. The last part of which is an attribute modality of gravity. This is, of course, non-point source acceleration. Yeah? And this is point source acceleration. This is a collapsed closed loop. Not just a closed loop, but a collapsed closed loop. This is mass capacitance barrier. In other words, it's the maximum capacitance that matter is allowed to achieve before it actually collapses. This is a collapsed supermass, or what I'm calling accurately a mass capacitance barrier, which is over m. In other words, it's the maximum barrier that matter is allowed to achieve. This is over force or over magnetism. This is where magnetism collapses, because the only reason anything stays within the visible universe is due to magnetism. This is what stupid human beings call a black hole. Now, they call it a hole even though it's not a hole, and they call it black because they can't see anything. Remember, this looks exactly like, you see the center of this black hole? This, by the way, is a real image. The center of this black hole looks exactly like the center of the torus here. I should have had a picture of a magnetic field here, but I didn't think I actually posted one. Sorry about that. But they're all over the place. It looks exactly like countless thousands of supercell images that I've taken. Yeah. It's no different looking at the supercell image where you see the black in the center, as if I took this torus, this hyperboloid, and of course the negative image of the hyperboloid is a torus, negative image torus hyperboloid. If I look dead straight down on this, and you had the magnetic field around it, which I would, that black spot in the center would be the hyperboloid, which of course would be increasing our inertial acceleration towards counter space, towards rest. Even little Johnny can understand the principle of counter space. Spatial, spatial, counter spatial. Mass, yeah, magnitude. Also, too, time. This is how you tell time, Johnny. You see the sand passing from here to here. We could basically measure how much sand has passed from here to here. See how much time has passed. This is, by the way, is a 5-minute timer. Johnny understands that. Mass, magnitude, spatial, over here. Yeah, either lobe, both lobes, and either lobe. Yeah, right here. No time, no mass, no magnitude, no space. What would be the opposite of space, little Johnny? Anti-space? Close enough. Counter space, anti-space. You take your pick, little Johnny. Both of those are accurate. Tomato, tomato. Anti-space, counter space. Little Johnny gets it. But I have all these adults out there. Hey, the fat bald tattooed guy talking about counter space. What sort of nonsense is he talking about? Well, the fat small bald guy, even to the people that hate him, they know he's smart. And I'm not interested in smarts. I'm interested in wisdom. They know he's smart. Did you really think I was inventing some word? Counter space! Because I used to think that about the word dielectricity. That's that guy, crazy word, dielectricity. I never heard that before. I must have invented that word. Like, oh, you mean that word that was in that book, Electrical Discharges, Waves, and Impulses, by the genius, even smarter than Tesla, Charles Steinmetz, wrote that book in 1917, over 100 years ago. Not the only book, by the way. You think you're smarter than the gods of field theory that gave us everything we have here today. Perfected AC generators and electrical distribution systems worldwide. These are the guys we're talking about dielectricity. Some of them are even talking about counter space. You think I invented that word? No, I did not. This is a free download. Once again, you just have to read it slowly. First page is just a pretty picture. Just a pretty picture. There's technique. I could stick all of this text on less than half of one page. It's not a lot. This is the unification of the entire universe. It's unassailable. It's undeniable. It can't be rejected. Well, you could reject it, but you couldn't prove it. It's like every time someone throws poo about something, which I don't mind, it's like you at least give substantiation. They never, ever give substantiation, logic, facts, evidences for anything. I don't like it. I don't believe it. I don't agree. Oh, what's your road's a bunch of... Prove it. Claims require substantiation and or logic. I've put it forward. I'd like to see you come after it because you can't. All of light, all of energy, all of matter, all of gravity, all of magnetism is unified in this very simple thing. Even little Johnny can get it. You have to read it slowly to little Johnny. But little Johnny can understand counter space from this simple little 5-minute egg timer that you use in your kitchen that you can get for $5 on eBay. I found this at a flea market for $1. It's like, oh man, there's a great teaching aid. It's only $1. I hope you like these videos. If you do, you could download this and link below in the description. Any donation also too is wonderful. That's in the description also. Not selling anything other than fine leatherwork. Well, I guess I actually am selling this. Anybody's interested in a 3-acre farm, I'm going to list it and sell it. you know, it'll be listed tomorrow or day after tomorrow, but I just thought I'd mention, if you're looking for a farm with great access, I've owned it for 19 years, and it's right on Tates Creek Road. Type in Valley View Ferry if you want to see about it. Valley View Ferry. Okay? Valley View Ferry. The land is right here against Tates Creek Road, and this dumps right down here. They actually filmed Season 1, Episode 1 of the TV show Justified. Right here, right beside my land. Right here. Yep, remember that TV show Justified? I never watched it, really. But, thanks so much for watching. You are welcome, because this is important. I would have loved something like this 20, 30 years ago. It's like, wow, there's the entire legend and key to the entire universe from one end of it to the next. And it's just a couple paragraphs. Technically, it's less than a couple paragraphs. Yeah. You are welcome. Any donations, always warmly welcome. Email me if you got any questions. That's in the description below also. Have a good day. Actually, I should say a great weekend. Nailed it. Nailed it.